thanks everyone for joining this. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David Granville. I'm not one of the successful women in biotech, but it's my honor to be here today. I actually host this session that happens every couple months. So you can go to the next slide. So at this point, we'd just like to acknowledge that at least some of us are presenting this from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and welcome people from other of the traditional homelands. Next slide. So we have a really cool session. It's a bit different than our usual format, but we're focusing this one on some of the women that have really paved the way in BC biotech, and I think BC really is a powerhouse in becoming a powerhouse in biotech, and it has been, we have had a number of great female leaders in this area, and including the ones today with Catherine, Norma, Renata, and Barb, as well as Julia and Natalie, which I'll introduce now. Next. Or actually, I'll do housekeeping first. So for anyone who has any questions, the way we'll run this talk is we'll have the 4 talks go first, and then we'll have like the fireside chat at the end. So if you could ask your questions in the chat box, and the moderators can then ask the questions, and please leave your microphones on mute. So it's my pleasure to introduce, I get to introduce the 2 moderators today. So our first is Natalie Dakers, who was a co-founder and CEO of Neuromed. She was a driving force and founding CEO at the CDRD, the Center for Drug Research and Development. She then transitioned to Accelerator, which was the founding president and CEO of Canada's first health sciences accelerator that focused on investing and supporting seed stage companies. Natalie's on a board member on a number of companies, including Sonic Insights, Stem Cell Technologies, Augurex, Biotalent Canada, as well as an associate with the Creative Destruction Labs. And she's received a number of prestigious awards, including Biotech Canada's Gold Leaf Award for Industry Leadership, Startup Canada Entrepreneur of the Year, 35 Most Influential Women in BC, and one of Canada's most powerful women. Our second moderator is Dr. Julia Levy, and I could go on forever on all of Julia's accomplishments over the years, but I'll promise to keep it brief. So under Julia's leadership, QLT recorded its strongest growth period in history, including Visidyne as the first FDA-approved treatment for macular degeneration, the leading cause of blindness in the elderly. This led to a number of awards, including the Future Vision Award, the Helen Keller Award, a number of Lifetime Achievement Awards. She's also a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada and an Officer of the Order of Canada. So, and for those of you who don't know or are new to this field, Julia is kind of a legend in the Canadian biotech field, paving the way for many of us, including myself, where QLT really allowed me to get a foot in the door over 25 years ago, and has been a huge inspiration to me, and I know many of the people that are speaking today as well. And I think what really stands out to me for Julia is her humility, genuine care, and for people, and her willingness to give back to the community, and still serves as a board member on many Canadian biotechs and other groups. So with no further ado, it's my pleasure to pass the virtual mic over to Natalie and Julia to take over. Thank you.
Thank you in the first place. Thank you, David, for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's very exciting to see so many women doing so well. And I'm really looking forward to these sessions this afternoon too. Is our first speaker is Catherine Hayashi? And Catherine is the president and CEO. Sorry?
I was just saying, yeah.
Did someone say something? Oh. Catherine Hayashi is president and CEO of Triumph Innovations, the business interface and commercialization arm connecting Triumph, Canada's Particle Accelerator Center, to the private sector via industry partnerships, licensing, and company creation. Hayashi is a chartered professional accountant with more than 25 years of operational and strategic planning, finance, and governance experience. in not-for-profit organizations, public and private companies, startups, and commercialization accelerators and incubators. Prior to her time at Triumph Innovations, she was the founding chief financial officer of the Center for Drug Research and Development, CDRD, Canada's National Drug Development and Commercialization Engine. In addition to her work establishing CDRD as a leader in preclinical translational research and commercialization, Hayashi serves as a director and audit committee chair of the Center for Commercialization and Cancer Immunotherapy at Hôpital Maisonneuve-Rosemont, as well as a board member of the Discovery Parks Technology Incubator. Sorry. I'm terribly sorry. Is the format now that Catherine will speak?
Yeah, should I share my screen?
Yes, please. I'm sorry about this.
Okay, let me get to the right screen. And so let me just, okay, so just a little bit, I think we already covered this in the intro. So Canada has a particle accelerator center, Triumph, and it is, there's about 600 people on site at Triumph. We do everything from look for the missing dark matter in the world to use medical isotopes for patients every year. So it's an exciting place to be. We do everything from detector technology and physics to, as I said, medical isotopes and tracers. I guess what I wanted to spend some time today talking about was career planning and how to stop worrying about the future. I've been doing a lot of these sessions lately, and in the last one, I spent a bit of time. I followed an incredibly organized woman who was one of those people, and we've all met them, that from, I think maybe from birth, had a strategic plan for her life and had a set of goals that she wrote out frequently. And, you know, it was all the things that we all wish we did. And somehow we think that that is the path to success, and it certainly is, but there's also other paths to success. And I guess what I wanted to do is maybe just spend a few minutes letting people know that you can be successful and happy. I mean, I love my job. I work with a remarkable group of physicists, engineers, radiochemists, machinists, electricians who do remarkable things every day, from trying to figure out where the missing dark matter is in the universe to designing and producing a new COVID ventilator from scratch when we didn't think we had enough of them, to developing what we hope will be a new treatment for cancer in the coming years. And so it's a wonderful place with wonderful people, and I get to do amazing and wonderful things every day. But how did I get here? I think if you asked me when I was a kid in high school what I was going to do what I wanted to do when I grew up, I think I would have said I wanted to be a visual artist and a painter. And then I think as I got older, I thought, oh, I'd really like to work in the music industry. I'd love to work for a record company. And then, of course, I grew up in East Vancouver to a family of immigrants, and those are not career options that go over very well over family dinner. So I went to UBC, and the least worst thing that I could pick in my mind was a business degree. So I went and got a business degree. To be honest, I picked finance because I was pretty good at it. It didn't seem very hard. And I thought it was quite interesting, but was it my career plan? Not exactly. So I got a finance degree, and then while I was getting a finance degree, we went through one of the worst stock market crashes in history, and there were no finance jobs to be had. And coupled to that, UBC, where I did my undergraduate, decided to switch from what was now, when you look back, was a ridiculous 5-year business degree program, and decided to get with the rest of the world and have a 4-year business degree program. So unfortunately, I was the 5 years who graduated with the 4 years. So there was a double graduating class, moving into a time where there really weren't very many jobs. So where there were jobs, interestingly, was accounting firms were hiring for people that wanted to become chartered accountants and didn't mind becoming an auditor for a few years in the meantime. And I thought, oh, well, that seems like a pretty good summer job. It's certainly better than working in a restaurant or some of the other terrible jobs that I had in my spare time. So I thought, oh, well, that seems pretty good. And they said, oh, well, you know, if you take a summer job with us, we'll pay for your final year of tuition. And so I was sold. So I signed up, and I thought, oh, I don't really like accounting, but you know, here we go. And so I did that for a few years. I was quite good at it, but I didn't really like it. But I sort of met a lot of people. I had a lot of drinks with folks and colleagues during a few years there. And eventually I left to go travel the world, and I came back and they said, oh, well, do you want to come back and work for tax season to save up some money? And I said, oh, that would be great. So I went back. And then while I was there, one of my colleagues said, I can't believe you came back. And I said, yeah, I know, I don't really like this. And she said, well, my brother is a controller for a funeral home conglomerate, and he's looking for an assistant controller. You should call him. So I did. And I went for a coffee with him, and he said, oh, yeah, you seem pretty good. You know, do you want to come work for me? So I ended up working for a funeral home company in the head office in Burnaby. And I worked there for a couple of years. And while I was at work one day, one of the partners I used to work with at Ernst & Young, where I articled, phoned me at work. And he said, hey, how's it going? And I said, oh, good, Fred. How are you? He said, oh, I'm good. Are you still interested in the music industry? And I said, yes. And he said, oh, well, I've got these clients, and they've got this record company, and they need someone to be their controller. And I thought of you. Do you want to go meet them? And I said, sure. So I went to go meet them. So they were a small record company. I was the 12th employee, but they had this really promising artist. Her name was Sarah McLaughlin, and she was just about to burst into the big time. And we did. So while I was there, I went from being the controller to being the general manager. Sarah sold something like 20 million records. And we went from being a dozen people to 100 people. And that was great, except it was a company that was owned by, you know, 3 guys that weren't going anywhere. And so I thought, oh, well, this is very interesting. I have my dream job from high school, but I don't really think it's that fun anymore. I've been here for almost 7 years, and what should I do next? And my husband came home one day and he said, well, I've got this opportunity to transfer to Mexico for my job at West Coast Energy. Do you want to go? And I said, sure, why don't we do that? So we moved to Mexico. I tried to learn Spanish with mixed success. And then we came back a few years later, and some colleagues that I used to work with had started this biotech company in Burnaby called Chromos Molecular Systems. And they called me and said, hey, I heard you're back from Mexico. And I said, yeah. I said, oh, well, we're looking for someone to help out as a director of finance. Are you interested? We've got this biotech company. And I said, well, I don't really know anything about biotech. They said, oh, that's okay. You're smart. You'll figure it out. So I think you'll really like it. And I said, oh, okay. So I went, and so Alistair Duncan, who many of you know, and eventually started a company with David Granville, was my boss there. I learned a ton. I loved biotech. And as one of the things that I did there, I went to a bunch of biotech conferences where I met Natalie Dakers, and who was a joy to go to conferences with. She's amazing and wonderful. And so we got to know each other, and she started the idea for the Center for Drug Research and Development. And eventually I went and tried to start that with her. So we worked, I can't tell you how many hours, days, weeks, and we were there for many years together. And she really played a huge role as a mentor, a boss, and a friend. So thank you, Natalie, for being wonderful. And then I got a call one day from my headhunter saying, hey, are you interested in a CEO position at Triumph Innovations? And I said, oh, well, that's interesting. And again, I said, well, I don't really know anything about physics. And they said, oh, that's okay. So I said, oh, all right. And so I've been there now for about 4.5 years. And I have to say, I really do feel like it's my dream job. So, I think that it was a path of very little planning that I followed, but it was a lot of following your head and your heart and your gut and finding people that you wanted to work with and building dreams and strategies together and executing on those strategies. So I think, for all of the people that are worried about, I don't really have a plan, I don't get up in the morning and know my passion, and that's the thing that I'm going to do until the day I die. You don't have to worry so much. There's a path for you. It might not be the same path as somebody else, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be happy, and it doesn't mean you're not going to be successful, and it doesn't mean that you can't make things that are really wonderful. So I think it's been a hard year, and I think the last time I gave this little talk, I got a bunch of notes from people saying, thank you. I think there's a ton of pressure, especially on young people now, to get into university. I mean, the bar to get into university now is so much higher, I think, than it was when I was a student. And there's so much pressure to know on day one what you want to do for the rest of your life. And you're expected to have this incredible plan in front of you, and you're expected to do all these things. And that's great. There are people that are like that, but there's a way forward and a way to happiness and success, even if you don't know right this minute what you want to do the rest of your life. So I think I had a bunch of other slides, and I thought, well, that's sort of the key of the message. And I think during COVID, we have to give each other a break and be a little bit kind to each other and kind to ourselves.
That was great. Thank you.
So
we move to, I think, Natalie. Oh, we're doing Norma now? That's me.
Thank you, Julia. And Catherine, I love that. I think there's a lot of pieces that you said that.
Just a second.
Sorry.
I think I have to introduce you.
Oh, okay. Yep. Thanks. But it was interesting, Catherine.
It was really interesting. I got lost in that, thinking about what you were saying. Okay, now we're turning to Norma, whose background is quite different. Norma is the CEO of Augurex, a biomarker evidence-based biotechnology company, a leading figure in the biotechnology sector. She spent 24 years in the life sciences field, working alongside building and leading teams that have consistently exceeded their corporate goals. Bill began her career in clinical research with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals and continued in several positions in sales management, marketing, and market access with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, Amgen, and Abbott Laboratories. Prior to her role as CEO of Augurex, Bill worked in various senior management roles in business development, commercial, and communications. Bill is a member of the board of directors of Reservoir Corp, Biotech Canada, the National Industry Association, and New Ventures BC, the province's premier tech competition and early stage accelerator. She was recently recognized as one of Canada's most powerful women in 2017, and one of BC's most influential women of 2018. Norma is an extraordinary person and so qualified in the work she does. Norma.
Thank you. I'm also going to share my screen. So just let me find the right one here and share. I always worry I'm going to share something I really don't want to share, Okay, so I think similar to what Catherine was saying, I grew up also in a family that was very traditional, and where there was an expectation that you go into a field in university that makes you a professional when you get out of it. So doctor, lawyer, accountant. And well, I was kind of driven by my love for healthcare. By the age of 15, my mother, who was a nurse at the Montreal General Hospital, talked to the nursing coordinator and said, my daughter wants to work in the hospital in some capacity. And she said, well, we can have her as a candy striper. So that's where my career in healthcare started. I was on the geriatrics ward, keeping old people company. And I realized within the first couple of weeks of working there that that was my natural habitat. I needed to be where healthcare was happening. But what I also loved or admired so much was the corporate world. I knew I had to be in a suit. A lab coat wasn't going to do it. The candy stripes weren't going to do it. I just loved the high heels. I loved the corporate stuff. I actually watch Suits right now for entertainment with my daughter. And every time I watch an episode, I get inspired to go back to my desk and work. I love corporations. And I also knew that I was really happy thinking about the future. I was really happy strategizing and thinking whether it was about my own career or how the hospital could do things better, or whether it was how Pfizer needed to change its strategy. I was always thinking that's where I lived and that's what I loved. And I was very driven by results from day one. So I think although I think you have to take what Catherine said fully, is that you cannot plan it all. I think a good starting point is know what you love. Know when you're in a certain space, how you feel. My daughter was saying to me recently, she's actually similar again, Catherine, we have to talk after this call because she's also a visual artist and loves art. And also we're trying to think of how could she make that applied. So she's at UBC in doing a Bachelor of Media Studies. But she said to me recently, she cannot imagine a future not working with children. So she works at Arts Umbrella part-time as a assistant teacher. And that is where she gets her high when she is around these 2 to 4 year olds. So, how do you combine your love of art with something that is applicable to earning a living, but makes you happy all the time? I think that is so critical. And that's the advice I give my 19-year-old daughter. And it's kind of like, it wasn't given to me so much, but I just gravitated to where I knew I felt really good. So, on this slide is really just a summary of, my resume, if you will, but it speaks to, in my mind, preparing. So my BSc was preparing. I loved health. I loved biology. So I spent time there. I realized getting into Pfizer, I realized that I love the corporation. So I solidified my space there by doing an MBA and becoming more well-versed in business. And right now I'm a PhD candidate at UBC in population and public health, which I completely love. And I know that that's going to direct the next phase of my career. So I underline on the career section StressGen, because that's where I met my co-founder, Anthony Murata, who at Augurex with me was instrumental in making the company what it is today. And I think of Pfizer and Amgen and Abbott times in my day as really preparatory for my entrepreneurial path, because you're not really entrepreneurial per se when you're in these large companies. You have to really do what you're set out to do, and you have a job to, and there's not that much room for creativity, if you will. But I knew I had to do something that was, that I could really have a big impact on. And had I not met Anthony at StressGen and actually taken that move, that wouldn't have happened. So I'm very grateful for that. And now I serve on some boards and have been for some time, but that's very formative. And so for me, it's, people say you're giving back because several of these are volunteer boards, but I've learned so much there, and I will continue to learn there and serve on other boards as well into the future. Now, so this is just my second and last slide, and I wanted to leave people with a little bit of advice, especially for young women, because I think that we have a bit of a bent here in terms of talking about any advice to leave with women who are starting out their careers and planning a career in biotechnology and entrepreneurialism is, I think, even though you can't plan all the steps, I think defining a clear goal of where you want to end up, or how, imagine what that future looks like for you. How do you look your happiest when you're thinking 5 or 10 years down the road? And then align your actions with that goal. One of the things that I was reading about recently from my daughter's sociology teacher forwarded a good paper to me, is something that I was thinking in the context of women. I mean, whether you're a man or a woman, if you focus, know how to negotiate, take risks, and know how to network, you're going to do well. So this is not really gender specific, but I thought, how do we do things a little bit differently as women, and what might we want to do a little bit more aggressively for those women who have gotten farther ahead? How have they done these things differently than women who perhaps have not? So one of the things in this paper that I read about was this fear. The fear of confirming negative stereotypes is known as something called stereotype threat. So my first piece of advice is focus on what you need to do for your job. Don't focus on that you're a female or not a female, or men getting ahead or women getting ahead. Just focus on the job. Negotiating, meaning really, it's not just a negotiation back and forth, it's a statement of what it is you want. So for example, I have an employee who said to me that she feels that she wants to become a director, and she wants me to help her understand where the gap is between where she is now and becoming a director. So guess what? Over the last couple of years, I've been really focused on helping her get there, and she was just promoted to director. So when you state what it is you want, people are there to help you. They're like, oh, that's what you want. Let me tell you how I can help you get there. And taking risks. One of the things that I think you'll hear a lot about today is we always feel like we need to only start when we're absolutely ready. I'd say start before you're ready. And if you're smart, you will figure it out. And this is something that a lot of men traditionally do. If they only meet 30% of the criteria on a job application, they apply anyway. Women, we want to be about 50 or 60% of the way there at least before we jump in. So I think that's a really good thing to do. And networking, it's, finding your champions along the way. So, for me, several people in the panel today, namely Natalie Dakers is on my board of directors. She always helps me think outside of where I'm at, which helps me. So it's not so much a network. She's part of my key group now. But had I not reached out early on and gotten the help and advice, she would have never been on our board. So you reach out to who you think, whether you know them or not, who can help you. Similarly, Julia Levy is the one who introduced me to Resverlogics. They were looking for a director. She and I were on a phone call, and she said, hey, do you want to reach out to them? And I did, and was recruited there. So a lot of, and the network changes over time. People who I relied on very early in Augrex's inception were extremely valuable there, but now we need different skill sets, and I need different types of help, and those people are there. So I would say, define your clear goal, fill your skill gaps, and do it in a focused way. Negotiate, tell people what it is that you want, take the risks, start before you're ready, and network because people want to help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norma. That was great.
Thank you.
I think it's handing over to Natalie now.
Yep, thanks, Julia. It's so nice to be here. And it's actually super fun to hear stories from people like Norma and Catherine, because the thing that you're going to get from these guys is it's just going to come from the heart, and it's going to be a very authentic point of view, which I think is something, I don't know, maybe it's just because we're in the life sciences, but that kind of makeup resonates very well with me. So it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Renata Obalo. She is the Vice President of Research Operations and Vancouver site head at Chinook Therapeutics, a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company. Prior to her role at Chinook, Dr. Obalo was Vice President of Chemistry at Inception Sciences Canada, where she and her team played a key role in the development of small molecule drug candidates for the treatment of dry, age-related macular degeneration and immuno-oncology. Previously, Dr. Obalo was Director of Chemistry at Xenon Pharmaceuticals and Merck, with expertise across multiple disease areas, including pain, anti-infectives, diabetes, osteoporosis. She was a key contributor to the development of odenacapib. Well, actually, she's going to say that better than I am, an investigational treatment for osteoporosis and bone metastases, and the team lead responsible for MK8245, a liver targeting inhibitor of sterile desaturase. So I'm going to turn it over to Renata to hear more of her story. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Natalie, for your kind introduction. And I'm going to just share my screen. Perfect. There we go. And thanks again, David, for the invitation. This has been a great session so far. Okay, so what I'm going to do, it's too many animations here, I'll just pop it out, is really just go over a couple of things. One is sort of my career evolution. I see it as sort of 3 stages: my evolution from an organic synthetic chemist to a drug discovery scientist, and then to an entrepreneur. And then I'll spend a few slides talking about how we decided on forming a new company called Chinook Therapeutics, and why we were going after kidney disease, and some of the evolution of this company that was just formed a couple of years ago. So as Natalie mentioned, I trained as an organic chemist, and I did that at UBC, both my undergrad and PhD, and then I postdoced in the UK. And at that point, in the sort of late 90s, I had this, decision to make. I really loved chemistry. What type of chemistry would I go after? I knew that I wanted to go into industry. I knew that I wanted to be sort of apply my scientific learnings. And a medicinal chemist can either go into a chemist can either go into medicinal chemist or process chemist. Medicinal chemistry is where you work in the early stage to try to develop a drug, a small molecule, and you work with biology, pharmacology, etc. And a process chemist is more late stage, where your task and your goal is to how to scale up a compound to kilo and ton scale for manufacturing, and with cost and efficiencies. And I was really much more drawn to the biology angle of it, so I became a medicinal chemist. And so my evolution from organic chemist to drug discovery scientist happened mainly at Merck, where I started off my tenure, started off as a bench chemist, making compounds, contributing to research programs. And when that site shut down in 2010, I was a director, and I was leading projects in multiple different disease areas that Natalie mentioned. And then I decided to make the switch from pharma to biotech. I really do love wearing lots of hats, and I wanted to sort of further my understanding in navigating a biotech world, and trying to partner projects and potentially commercialize and learn a different therapeutic indication. So at Xenon, it's a company in Burnaby that many of you know, and I was head of chemistry there, and we gained more knowledge in pain, and was instrumental in licensing their pain asset with a Genentech. And that was a really interesting experience. And then the next sort of big jump came when I was offered with Inception Sciences to set up a Vancouver site, and that playing more of an operational role. And I must admit, and what Norma said about taking risks is bang on. You really do have to push yourself outside your comfort zone. When I was offered this position, and this was actually from my first mentor back in the 90s. He was now in San Diego, starting up this company called Inception Sciences. I thought, well, what do I know? I'm a scientist. What do I know about negotiating a lease and building labs and recruiting in a team of highly experienced drug hunters in areas not only chemistry, but it was so much fun, and it made me realize that I really do love operations and company building. And while at Inception, we worked on a number of areas, but principally ophthalmology. And you know, it was kind of fitting as we're in the QLT building, and Julia, I really want to thank you for building such a great building. You know, Norma's in there as well with Augurex, and it's become this biotech hub, and it's a great infrastructure. There's Jazz Pharmaceuticals, there's Genevant now, Anandia, and it's a great team of scientists working, and we often share, you know, people come and use our NMR and everything. Anyways, it's a great building. I love it. And I hope it's always going to be called the QLT building. And then at the end of, during 2018, Versant Ventures, which is the principal backer of Inception Sciences, we were their discovery engine, thought that it would be good for the different sites of Inceptions to spin off and dedicate themselves to one area and become their own sort of separate, you know, company under their own, with their own CEO and own umbrella. And so this again is sort of that entrepreneurship shift. So we spent, you know, a bulk of 2018 actually deciding what would this new company that the Vancouver site, what would it become and what would we go after? And this was really, you know, quite a challenging experience. We evaluated 23 different possibilities and we landed on kidney research. And I'll go through that, why we did. And we founded Chinook Therapeutics just over 2 years ago, where I'm heading up the research operations and am site head. So it's been a really great journey. I think, like Norma said, be open to different positions and different opportunities, and you never know where you're going to go, but you're going to have so much fun and broaden your experiences along the way. And so why kidney research? So this is really the thought process of when you're forming a new company. What should you go after? What's the competition? What's the market? You know, are there good opportunities? And we really felt that kidney disease, going after precision medicine and kidney disease in particular, was really something that we wanted to form the company around for a number of reasons. There's 4 pillars. It's a really high unmet medical need. There's hardly anything been approved in the last 20 years. In fact, it's like immuno-oncology was about 20 years ago. And so the only sort of things that people that have kidney disease can turn to is, you know, dialysis or kidney transplant, both of which are very extreme. The other thing that was emerging was novel biology, new genetically defined targets and translational platforms that would help us figure out what targets to go after and you know, potentially increase our chances of translation to the clinic. And then also emerging patient stratification. So causal biomarkers, how can we stratify patients in clinical trials to increase the success and target the right people for the right drug? And then finally, the FDA recently changed their stance on how drugs could be registered in certain kidney diseases. It's very daunting to go after a big target, you know, like chronic kidney disease or diabetic nephropathy, in which you have to go, you know, for 5 or 10 years and do an outcome study. For a biotech company, that's not very tenable. But now there are certain diseases that we're going after where there is a good, strong link for urinary biomarkers, like how much protein is in the urine or how much oxalate, that you can get registered on, and they correlate with kidney preservation. So these 4 things made us decide to start Chinook Therapeutics. And it's been a fun ride these last couple of years with Chinook. So it started in January 2019. There was only basically 20 of us that were in the Vancouver office in the QLT building, and we had preclinical assets. We expanded our footprint slightly to about 12,000 square feet. That's labs and offices, so that we could build a vivarium and have all of the functions internal: chemistry, biology, in vivo pharmacology, drug metabolism. We obviously needed to raise money and hire a CEO, and we hired Eric Dobmeier from Seattle Genetics. And he was instrumental in raising our first Series A funding of $65 million. And then we had 2 key inflection points or real points that define the company. One was about a year ago, we licensed in a phase 3 asset, atrasentan from AbbVie, which our hypothesis is that it will work for glomerular diseases in reducing proteinuria. And because, starting right off the bat with a preclinical team, with a phase 3 asset, you can imagine doing a worldwide phase 3 clinical trial in over, in 230 sites. We needed to build a development team ASAP. And so we set to building this. We did some more funding. We were super happy to be awarded the Emerging Life Sciences Company of the Year by Life Sciences BC. And then the other catalyst, which is really set our direction, happened in October. So to run a phase 3 trial, it's 200 to 300 million, and we needed to raise capital. Would we go the traditional IPO route, or would we do a merger? And we were opportunistic in finding a merger with the Duro Biotech, which was an immuno-oncology company. And they checked a number of boxes. So they had 200 million in cash. They gave us access to the public market. This is us on NASDAQ. But importantly, they had a kidney asset, Bion 1301, which is an anti-APRIL antibody for glomerular diseases. And if you think about this, we had a kind of a gap in our pipeline. We had these preclinical asset, and then we had a phase 3 asset. So this new asset bridges. It's in phase 1 and 2 studies. So we're fast forward to today. Where are we? We're 110 people. So we basically quintupled in size during the pandemic. So that was something. We have now clinical assets in all phases, and preclinical assets in IND as well as in earlier stages. And then we expanded our footprint. We expanded the site in Vancouver to 23,000. And then now we have, and all of research is being carried out in Vancouver to feed the pipeline and produce new compounds to go into the clinic. And then of course, Seattle and Oakland, which is where Aduro was based. So I don't think I'll go further. I think this sort of tells the evolution of Chinook and sort of where we've been and what we've learned along the way. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions later.
Thank you so much, Renata. That's the Chinook story, I think, for all of us is really something to think about. So much happening in such a short time. So I would like to now introduce us to our next speaker. This is Dr. Barbara Canard. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Response Biomedical. And through her leadership, the company expanded from offering cardiac point-of-care testing into a global acute care diagnostic leader, transforming diagnostic testing worldwide with the central focus on better patient diagnosis, improving patient outcomes, and supporting healthcare reform. Dr. Canard also serves as the chairman of the board of AceTech, a local CEO member-based organization run by CEOs for CEOs. The organization is designed to help grow and scale tech businesses and stimulate the economy through job creation and global expansion. Barb's priorities are on building elite teams that specialize in managing organizational changes to improve processes, reduce costs, and accelerate business performance. Barb's team has obtained Health Canada certification for 12 products and maintains key regulatory approvals to support sales in several global jurisdictions, including Canada, the US, Japan, China, and the European Union. And I'll turn that over to Barb.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm super privileged to be here with all these great women. Wow. And I'm going last. It's hard to follow that. But I'll share my screen and do my best. So I'm going to share my story. So a little bit of my story. I just got to do one more thing here. There we go. So I'll start with talking a little bit about me moving from scientist to business leader. Then I'll share a little bit of the story of response, and then use the response story to talk about the things that we've had to face to grow the business. And I think the first thing was being a scientist and moving to business leader being quite an interesting journey, to say the least. I was originally hired at Response in 2004 by the founding CEO as a scientist. And I developed a product that was recognized by the senior leadership team as one of the only ones that was easy to manufacture. And I think it's because at that time, I knew that the manufacturer was a customer. So, I moved from academia into industry, but stayed within the sciences. And then strange things happened in the company, lots of war stories, but I ended up being asked to run the quality team. And, one of the skills you do get as a scientist is researching. So I've heard somebody say, and I think it was, there was Catherine who said, your path is uncharted. Your path is uncharted. But if you're passionate about things, you'll find a way. I think I heard somebody say, maybe it was Renata and Norma, push yourself out of your comfort zone. I think one of my personality traits that helped me was I just didn't let anything get in the way. I knew what we needed to do. I was going to research it. I tried to educate people. We learned how to educate people in science. But my transition to CEO was extremely abrupt. So I was promoted to CEO in 2016, and I literally did not know what to do or what a CEO was. So I did my favorite thing is I Googled it. I researched it, and I found out that most scientists don't become good CEOs. Many scientists are not good entrepreneurs. Only 10% of CEOs hold a doctorate degree. And this was stated because CEOs need to have a business, financial, and management skills and things like that we don't necessarily learn in getting a PhD. Although I would fundamentally disagree because we have strong skills in trying to learn new things. However, the stats were even worse for me because apparently 5% of tech CEOs are women. And only 1% to 3% of business investments are given to women leaders. And when I was promoted to CEO, we were on the verge of bankruptcy. And the first thing I had to do was raise money. I can tell you it was not easy. Hearing someone say, push yourself out of your comfort zone, hell yeah. So I won't go into all the war stories, but I will give you a snapshot of where we are today as a company and then start telling you a little bit about how we got here. So Response has been around for a long time. We were part of the original biotech industry in Vancouver. Super proud that we've lived this long. So what we did when I first became CEO is just looked at, where are we successful? What's going well? And at that time, I think 70% of our sales were one test. It was troponin for heart attack. So what we looked at was, okay, we're successful in these acute care settings. And what we're doing is we're really helping doctors diagnose faster. And this is proven in multiple research studies to give better outcomes for patients and save lives. It also reduces healthcare costs. So we looked carefully at what other diseases are diagnosed in this particular call point. And heart disease continues to be the biggest killer, also the most preventable disease. So this is very sad for humans. So we have many markers for heart disease, troponin and NT-proBNP being the biggest sellers. Sepsis is a close second. So we now have a sepsis marker that we've added to the platform. And then putting cancer aside, respiratory infections are big killers. And I put a data point for COVID here just to give you an idea, since this is a very, real situation for us, that COVID has killed a lot of people in the last, however many months, right? Just over a year. The platform itself that we have is based on fluorescence. So we detect biomarkers in a small drop of blood and in nasal mucus in 15 minutes. The instrument is designed for a highly stressful environment. So it's designed for an emergency room, really. So where someone's under stress, you put the sample on the cartridge, you put it in the instrument, you walk away, and there's a result. And then we have a team that was skilled at developing for manufacturability. So we had to leverage that. And then we leveraged our ability in getting clearances in various markets. The next thing I researched in the company was, where are we selling? Well, I have a sad story. We do not sell in Canada. We don't have any customers in Canada. We sell mostly in emerging markets. We do have a footprint in the US. But one of the reasons is, if you talk to other CEOs in the industry and some very big companies, Canada's known worldwide as being one of the most complex, if not the most complex market to penetrate. So as a small to medium company, it's just not something we have the funds to do. We've been successful outside of Canada, so we continue to do that, and we sell through channels. So I had to learn a lot about, how do you work with channel partners in foreign countries, done a lot of traveling, very interesting things I've learned. But because we worked so hard to focus, we were positioned interestingly when COVID hit. We already had markers for severely ill, the big killers, but those biomarkers were also relevant for comorbidities with the severely ill. So we were able to serve our current customer base with the tests that we already had, which was great because, we wanted to help. We wanted to be there. We did get a lot of support from the federal government. We got some funding to scale our manufacturing here in Vancouver. We got funding to develop a COVID antigen test. We're launching in Europe, Middle East, and Latin America. And we're probably the only platform right now in the world that has the tests for comorbidities and a COVID test on it. So this is where we are today, but through the process of really figuring out how to focus the business, there's a lot of obstacles that you have to overcome. And I think the local biotech community is very skilled in the art of innovation and great ideas. We're known globally here for BC for, really having good technology. If you talk to the cynical, we make snacks for big companies. They come in and buy us because we're known for that. But response is different. We wanted to keep our head office and scale here. So to get through to commercialization, we talk about the valley of death where we get financing and seed financing, and then you get to commercialization and you've arrived, right? It's like the prince and the princess have married, you've arrived, you're commercialized. The reality is there's actually many, many valleys of deaths after that. So this is some data from 2014, and if people are familiar with scaling businesses, they're probably familiar with Harnish. But the things that happen are, as you're growing a business, you have hit these inflection points where you have to hire a team. So you have to become skilled in the art of hiring the right people. And it's expensive, so you can get financing for that. Or maybe you're at a stage of an organization where it's not easy to get financing. This is kind of a boring phase, right? We're just scaling an old technology. Nobody really wants to invest in that. A lot of companies have to go south of the border or outside of Canada to get that kind of investment. But there are other things that you have to focus on to get through those valleys of deaths. And these are the things that you have to research and learn. But when you're designing a product, there's three things. There's market dynamics. So you want to make sure you know what solution you're solving. You really want to know who's buying it, and you want to stay focused on that. It's super important. I know sometimes we get excited about our technology and we can solve 100 problems, but you really just need to start by solving one and validating your technology, keeping an eye on the competitive landscape. One thing that's really changed is you can't write a business plan anymore that lasts 10 years. So we have learned that we got to look at the market dynamics every quarter because something's changing. Scalable infrastructure, talked a little bit about that. I think hiring the right people is probably the most important thing. And then I think we've heard mention a few times about leadership and humility. I think that being humble is a critical part of growing a business, because if you're not humble and you can't admit mistakes and you can't pivot, you become the next BlackBerry, you become the next Blockbuster. And this is true for all businesses. This isn't just true for healthcare businesses, because we have other challenges. And I just wanted to touch on that in the next slide, because once you're in the healthcare industry, you need the expertise to be able to handle the regulatory environment. What's happening is it's getting more and more complex and more expensive, and there really isn't a lot of local support for this stage of company, because we are more focused on early stage. And I think we've learned through the pandemic that Canada needs to start really funding their manufacturing sector. I mean, if you think of the vaccines, you know, the US and Britain all have manufacturing, so they all have the vaccine, and we've been waiting for importing vaccines. We need to do better. And it does make it hard to hire a talent, because that manufacturing sector isn't always here. But it's possible. There's lots of resources locally. Get a business coach, you know, join Ace Tech. There's people that can support you. I think someone mentioned that support's important. And then back to the Canadian healthcare system. I mean, it is complicated. The reimbursement challenges, the procurement of new technology into our healthcare system is very, very difficult. If you've done it, I'm totally impressed, because there's a lot of time and expense required here. And I wanted to leave you on one other note as you're designing and thinking of new ideas. You can have all of this set up and awesome, but if customer perception is that your product is not the solution, or you're trying to change standard of care, it's very challenging. And this data, this is just food for thought. I put this here because we're all scientists. This is on the x-axis, the viral load in a patient. And then this red line is the viral load and days of onset, symptoms, and the infectious stage of the disease. And this is a data set on rapid visual testing. Where the rapid visual tests are important are when the patients are most infectious. But if your customer thinks PCR is the answer to everything, and we like to do a little forensics at the end of the disease when people still carry DNA from the virus, that's the product that your customer wants. And I'm just going to leave you with that as an interesting note. Yeah, and so that's my story and the company's story. And I hope you learn something about, you know, what to think about when you're growing a business, and you can do it. I mean, I just want to say, for me, I think most of the not letting anything scare you and just research it, use the skills you have, because, you know, as a scientist or anyone who's interested in learning, you can learn a lot about different areas of the company. And that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Barb. That was wonderful. And I mean, what an incredible diversity of individuals that we have heard from today. So
Yeah,
we've got
what wisdom we've heard from all of you. This is really fantastic. You know, the advice and wisdom that has been expressed here is well, it tells you how to succeed. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, everybody's got different stories for sure.
Yeah.
So we have a bit of a Q&A period here. People are putting in some questions into the chat. So Julie and I will take turns sort of pulling them out. So one of the things I wanted to ask, though, because you know, we have this incredible group of people to talk to about this. I mean, you've all come at this from different journeys, and I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is you all have to hire people. You're building teams, and it'd be interesting to hear from each of you. What are you looking for when you're hiring? Because, you know, when we think about the biotech industry in BC, we used to always talk about money. Everybody needed money, and we didn't have enough money. But the thing that I think is coming up more and more for us all is talent. Can we find the talent we're looking for here? Where do we have to find our talent? And each of you have had to build teams. And I'm sure you've made great choices. And I'm sure you've made some of those choices where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I've done this to my company. So it'd be really interesting to hear from each of you, what is it that has worked for you? What are you looking for? And what would be your guidance in building the best team that you can for your company? And maybe we'll just start, from the top, coming down, Catherine, then Norma and Renata and Barb. Just a quick thought would be great. Thank you.
I think someone touched on this. You do have to have a vision or strategy or goal or objectives, however you want to picture it. And then you have to figure out what the gaps are. Like, you're hiring somebody because there's a gap, right? And so, and then trying to find someone that's going to deliver what you need in that gap. And I think I deal with a lot of younger folks and earlier in their career, and a lot of the things that they think about are things that they did. They published a paper, they did an experiment, they got some data. Like, I think that switching to what is that person going to deliver to the organization that the organization needs, thinking about it that way, and really thinking about, we've been thinking a lot about strategy lately, and one of the ideas that came up was, how does strategy work? Well, you do A, where are you now? B, where do you want to be? And C, how are you going to get from A to B? And one of the things that we've been thinking about is actually, it's not A, B, C, it's B, A, C, right? So where are you trying to go? And then you figure out, well, where are you today? And then how you get there, because you can't get too stuck in where you are. You do have to keep your eye on where you're trying to go and then what you need to get there. So I think that's a subtlety that a lot of us miss, because it's so easy to be stuck in where you are. This is the technology that we have. This is the team that we have. This is the whatever, like, yeah, that's important, but also, thinking strategically about where you're trying to go, why it makes sense to go there, all of the stuff that Barb talked about like, what is the market really? What do customers actually want? So, and then how are you going to get there from here? So I hope that kind of helps, but I think that's a subtle strategy thing that we're trying to be better at, is not getting too stuck in the problems of today or the things that you did yesterday to get to today. Where are you trying to go that makes sense? And then what do you need to fill to get there? And a lot of that is people.
Norma?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that we as leaders actually have to define clearly what it is we want. And I think that's where the problem starts sometimes. To Catherine's point, you're trying to fill a gap, and have we posted it right to the right audience, right? That's often, I find, a poor first step, because we set ourselves up and the candidate potentially for failure. So assuming your question is starting with that we know what we want and we're hiring the right person, how do you find that person, or how do you characterize that person? And for me, it's something I learned from a book I read written by Brian Tracy, and it was mainly around hiring salespeople, but I found that it applies to everything. And he uses the acronym SWAN, which is somebody who's smart, who works hard, who's ambitious, and who's nice. Because you can't train for any of those things, right? You can't make someone smart. You can't make them work hard if they have a bad work ethic. You can't make them ambitious, that they want to do the best job they can. That's part of, training that probably happened before they got to you. And nice, I think, speaks to the soft skills and their ability to work with a bunch of different people and that flexibility. So I like the SWAN acronym, and I use it throughout the organization when other people are hiring for within our group. And then I think when people are on board, what really matters a lot to me. So, one is recruitment of talent, one is retention of talent. And I think the people I like to retain usually have a heck of a lot of energy. They're mobilized. You throw something at them, they're ready to catch the ball. they're coming up with ideas all the time. Like they're energetic momentum generators. It excites me to work with people like that. And loyalty, when you're trying to get biotech off the ground and trying to get through those valleys of death, as Barb described, if people are on your team are not loyal and have your back, it's all harder. It's already all hard. It's like, it's fun, but it's hard. And if you have people in the company working against you, or they don't believe in the product, or they don't believe that something can be possible, or exporting seems like a big, impossibility to them, it's a non-starter. So it's that having your back and having the back of the company that I think is so critical once people are on board.
Thanks, Norma. That's great. Renata?
Sure. Yeah. So speaking as somebody that, has gone through 200 interviews last year to hire 90 people. And so I think what Norma says totally resonates. For us, it's motivation and cultural fit. I mean, yes, on paper, when you read a CV, they might have the right background and the right attributes, but unless you get them interviewed by a wide range of people to really understand, all of these candidates look great, but which is the right cultural fit? And one of our values at Chinook, we have 5 pillars. One of them is serious fun. You work so long and so many hours with people. If they're not people that are engaging and exciting and motivating and loyal, like Norma said, it's going to be, you only need 1 or 2 people that don't fit that mold that can throw everything off. So hiring is actually, I think, the most important thing in starting a new company. And, I'm sure we've shocked some of the candidates coming in, because when we do an interview, it's almost 8 hours. Okay. We have the whole gamut, all different departments interviewing. They give a seminar. We cross, check everything, do cultural checks, and we can really, we've sort of have, hopefully, and we've made mistakes. We have made mistakes along the way and have had to rectify those. But I think by having everybody involved and really getting a sense of their culture and their cultural fit is important. We, to help us, we've used lots of recruiting agencies as well, because, kidney expertise is there's not that many, and we've just hired somebody from Italy actually that's come in. So getting those folks that are early enough in their career or late enough that they're going to move to Vancouver, trying to relocate somebody that's got 2 kids, that lives in a cheap place is really hard. So you have that sort of relocation challenge as well. And then for people that are coming straight out of university, we have a big co-op program. So we have at any given time 3 or 4 co-ops working in our labs, in chemistry, biology, and that's a great, people that go into co-op are generally motivated and they're at the top of their class. They're really good candidates. You get to really figure out, is this a potential employee? And we've hired 2 excellent candidates that I'm not sure we would have come across if we hadn't brought them through in the co-op program. So yeah, hiring the right people is, if you don't hire the right people, the company will fail.
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement.
Yeah, to you, Barb.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have to say, one of the reasons I went into scientists as a science was I didn't want to work with people. I wanted to work with test tubes. So I have to say it's been a big problem for me developing the people skills. So the mistakes that I make that are colossal are the hiring mistakes. But I think the advice I would give is hire slow. I think when I make a mistake, it's because I get desperate because there's a gap and it's like, oh my God, this is so much work for everyone. We got to find, that's when you're going to make the mistake, and fire fast. As soon as the red flag's there, it's just going to get worse. So that would be my high level. I think I heard someone say hire for the future. Yes, totally. Because where you are today, if you're growing, you might not even be the same company in 3 months. That's what I've noticed. And then also, one of the first things we did was define our culture in a very clear way so that you could use it in everyday language and make sure that people are culture fits. The hard skills are important, but some positions you can train the hard skills. It's the culture fit I've found is the most critical, and defining it clearly. There's also a need to define what's not a fit. I think that becomes useful because then you kind of know what's not a fit and it's clear in your head when you're hiring. But definitely hire slow would be my one statement that would save you.
Nice. Julie, you're muted.
Okay, sorry, my mouse was misbehaving. What an amazing amount of knowledge and wisdom we have just been exposed to, and I hope our audience is taking this in, because I had a simple way of dealing with this when I was hiring myself, and that was, would I want this person as a neighbor? And I think it really comes down to I mean, and you all have brought out this importance of cultural fit. And I can't tell you how important that is in retrospect with my own experience. And hiring the wrong person can be so expensive in terms of time, the whole interference that happens with your plans and things like that. So the hiring slow thing, terrific. I mean, all of these things are just so essential.
Yeah, completely agree. I use the airport test. Could I sit and have a beer with this person 1 hour, for 5 hours, for 12 hours? Because you know what? You always get stuck in an airport, at least you used to anyway. So
Natalie, I've had an experience of being on a plane with someone that we had hired, and I hadn't wanted to hire them in the first place. And that 12-hour flight was just awful.
So there's a question here from our audience, and one of the things they're asking about is how do you build your network? How do you use your network? How do you pick out of the crowd somebody that's going to ultimately help you? I think for many of us, when you're starting out, you enter a room, you don't know anybody. It's pretty intimidating, but you know that you've got to have conversations because you know that the networking that you do is going to be valuable. So what are your tips and tricks of breaking down some of those barriers and getting to know people, and who's been helpful, and what kinds of things have been helpful for you? I'm going to put it as a free for all for you all now.
I mean, I do think networking, I mean, when I look back at my life, networking has been the thing. I mean, every really good job that I've had or really good opportunity has been a result of networking. So, and it's, I mean, not very many people are natural people that just love to work the room. They walk into a thing and they don't know anyone. They're like, oh, this is fantastic. I mean, very few people are like that. So you do kind of have to force yourself to do it. But I think, maybe we should just say, like, I absolutely, if I'm going to an event like that, I absolutely don't mind anybody coming up to introduce themselves, to say hello, to tell me what they're interested in. I mean, like, don't be afraid to do it. I mean, everyone's at a networking event to network. So just, screw up your courage, walk up and say, hi, I'm so-and-so. This is what I do. It's okay. And I do go to a lot of those things, and people are nervous to come talk to you. And I think, just don't be. You just have to try, and you have to make that effort. And very few people will react negatively. And if they do, then you just have to brush it off and go on to the next person. It's not, don't take it personally. Just keep going.
I would add that if you know who's going, what I would do is have an idea of who might be there, who I might already know, who knows those people, and if they can make an introduction. So I generally go to networking meetings with a plan. I know who it is I want to meet. There may be a lot of people that I meet that I didn't plan on, and those are often the best ones. But it's funny how if you just plan something, what you come across along your way always is helpful too, even if you don't actually get to meet those specific people you were looking to. So set a plan up in terms of who's there, why you want to talk to them. There might be people on this chat, for example, you can message directly and ask to have a 10-minute phone call with informational interview. So lots of, I think it's setting a plan.
Yeah, I totally agree with Norma. It's if you can find a common, somebody that they know that you know, that just kind of breaks the ice, and it really makes it less intimidating. You know, I think you know, I do a lot of mentoring events at UBC and the universities, and just, yeah, I think students are getting trained a little bit more on it compared to when back when we were in school, and I think it's great that they can just, you know, lots of people just cold call me or send me a LinkedIn message, and I'm always happy to engage and to listen to their story or answer their questions. So I think it's just not being afraid to do it, though, you know, granted it is intimidating until you sort of realize that most people are really do want to talk and are happy to share information. And just as an aside, you know, all the jobs that I've obtained, I didn't apply for any of them. Like, I've applied for other jobs, but it's always through word of mouth that somebody says, oh, this is happening. That's, you know, a lot of positions just happen that way, and you find your way just because of who you know and who they know.
Yeah, and I just put in the Zoom chat that networking includes Zoom. So everybody should have their cameras on if you're here to network.
Yeah.
Tip number one.
That's a good point. I mean, just from my experience, I had a lot of success networking because I had some very well-connected mentors. So if you can find a gracious human, like I'm hearing these lovely ladies say they're happy to let you reach out to them, you can use a mentor to help you meet some very, you know, well-connected people. I just was privileged enough to have that opportunity.
And LinkedIn is such an important tool. I mean, I don't know what everyone did before LinkedIn, but the people that know people that you know through LinkedIn is just an incredible way to, like, oh, we have a common contact. You can ask for an introduction from your common contact. It really is a resource for people, especially if you're going to something where you're going to a networking event and you know you want to talk to someone. Well, who do I know that knows that person?
Great advice.
Yeah, and I guess connected to that is really think hard about your profile on LinkedIn. You know, get people to give you some feedback on it. I think Catherine's making a great point that don't underestimate the value of it. And there's definitely key ways to make it more, make you more findable. Okay, so we have another question here. So I think this is coming from a clinical person. So they're trying to figure out, how do you balance a career? Let's say you're going, I don't know if they're a medical student or they've just started a practice, but how do you balance those necessary elements against an interest to do something in commercialization, getting a device validated? How do you do it all? Like, how do you think through what you might be doing for your day-to-day? Maybe it's your day-to-day paying your bills, but you really want to get something working. Do you have some thoughts about how you would guide somebody? Should they pick a partnership? Is there a way to help them think this through? I don't know if Barb or Renata, you faced this when you were going to school. Were you ever caught with the commercial bug that you wanted to know if you could? And Julia, of course, you had to do it from an academic point of view, but maybe some comments on this?
Yeah,
I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. If this person is, I mean, commercializing and developing and validating a product is a full-time job.
For more than one person.
Yes. So, I mean, my only advice would be figure out which part of that you're really good at and find help to do the other pieces, because it's a big project. that without knowing more details. Julie, I don't know, you were going to say
Yeah.
something.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't quite sure what was being looked for here, and I guess it was the terminology that you sorted out there and pointed out how complicated that is, because every one of those things is a professional difference from one person to another. So. And again, your advice in terms of saying, find out what you're best at and what you like most, and then find other people equally interested in the other parts. It really, I mean, any kind of development in this area involves teamwork. I mean, you can't do it by yourself.
No.
Well, you know, the interesting thing that this brings up, and because we're being hosted by Vancouver Coastal in this way, the clinician, you know, absolutely demanding job, right? But if you've got interest in commercialization, very difficult to have monies funded through your clinical practice to do any kind of research. And I think one of the things that David's really interested in understanding better of is how do we have hospitals, academics, industry working better together, using the skills that come with all of that, those different perspectives. You know, how do we do a better job accessing the expertise that we have in hospitals so that we can validate our ideas and not run into the issues that, as you're talking about, Barb, where we don't, you know, we're not commercializing directly our technologies here. They're going elsewhere where they're being bought. Is there a way in which in an early stage we could actually do better upfront so that we could take advantage of all the resources that we actually have in-house, so to speak?
I mean, the gap that I've witnessed is the funding for manufacturing stage, which is different. But the second piece I notice is how hard it is to do clinical trials here, right? And is there even, I know there's a portal that you can submit proposals and stuff, but to me, that's the biggest gap I've noticed in terms of support. And then we go down to the US and, you know, I'm getting funding from the government here and I can't even pay a Canadian to do a clinical trial because it's just not that easily accessed. And even the CROs in Canada use US sites. So I would be quite disappointed about that. I think there's an opportunity here for clinicians to make money on clinical trials and keep money in Canada.
I don't think there's a disinclination on the part of clinicians. I think this may be an information gap.
It could be. It could be that I know I've talked to many physicians that want to do it, but the decision-making process and how to get the ITA requirements from Health Canada become harder for smaller companies. So it's easy because it's more of a business in the US to just go down there. That's what we've found.
Yeah, the infrastructure is much firmer there than it is here. Yeah.
I think for me, it's been more about how much time do you want to spend based on the size of the market. You know, when we think of the United States, it's for healthcare, there's a high willingness to pay. The healthcare system, you know, is one of the ones that spends the most on healthcare per capita worldwide. So, you know, you kind of, if you're a young company, you're going to go where the you know, the market size draws you. And in Canada, it's not that we don't want to serve our own country. Of course, we do very much. But the regulatory hurdles are challenging. Procurement is, you know, not as nimble. It's surmountable, but it's a question of how much energy you're going to spend for an hour versus if you spent it somewhere else, you have a faster and higher return.
Yeah. And it's the province by province reimbursement issues that make it really hard here.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe that's a question back to you, David, is, you know, with you running the research efforts out of the hospital, how do you make it more accessible, get over some of these challenges that it is for these companies to, because you know, it'd be so much better if we could validate in our neighborhood, right? Cheaper, less complicated, building relationships up front. I mean, what I hear over and over by young companies in the technology side is that our hospitals their adoption, their ability to adopt or desire to adopt is just so low. We just can't even get the interest by our own people. So maybe it'd be interesting to hear from you, like what are you trying to do that's different?
That's a
Not
good
that I put
question.
you on the spot.
Yeah, I was being the silent observer. So yeah, no, I think I totally agree. I think there's a lot of challenges, and I think it's a matter within BC of changing the environment. I mean, we're in this environment where we're getting a mature life sciences ecosystem, and I was just on the life sciences meeting last week with where Sir John Bell was speaking about how it is in London, and how, you know, no longer are we in an era where, at least in London, where, you know, it's big bad biotech over here and academics over here and hospital over here. Everybody's working together in unison, and I think that's the type of environment we really got to start to create in Vancouver, where people are working together, and there's, you know, industry next to academics, next to the hospital, and we have those, you know, collision spaces and interactions, and start working more together and breaking down, you know, some of the barriers that are, you know, unfortunate in Canada that aren't in other jurisdictions. I think the recent patented medicines price review board changes in Canada aren't going to make things any easier, but I think we can maybe lobby the government a bit to make things a little bit more streamlined in Canada, so we can work together better.
My understanding is that this actually comes down to the budgeting process in Canada, and procurement, where they will procure tests or whatever at the cheapest possible place, and that doesn't usually involve the startup biotech that has a test that they like to introduce, and there's kind of a wall there, I think, which is really unfortunate. But there's money at the base of it.
Always. Well, I think we're coming close to closing. So I'd just like to give an opportunity to each of our amazing speakers to just leave us with some parting words. What's sort of a thought that you'd like to share with our audience, and then turn it back to David.
Maybe I'll start. So, I think, when you're developing your career and your career path, going after your passion is really important. You really have to love what you do, and don't be afraid of making a wrong decision, because there's so many different forks in a career path, and doesn't matter which one you take, you're going to learn, you're going to excel, and you're going to find new opportunities. And pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. That's, I guess, my final message.
Thank you.
I guess I would add, somebody said this to me the other day, and I think it does ring true, and it aligns very well with kind of what we've been saying. There's that old saying about 80% of success is showing up. And I think what showing up means is exactly what we've been kind of talking about, not just being physically present, but being really engaged, being motivated, being a keener, being passionate. Like, that's what showing up is. And then I think the other corollary is the other 20% is following up. And, I see it all the time that people will make one attempt and then there's no follow-up. And I mean, honestly, hardly anyone follows up. So if you are a person that follows up, you will get so much farther in life by just being that person that is just doing that little extra bit that other people don't do, right? That's the people that are just dogged, they're relentless. They just keep going. And a lot of your success in life is just being engaged and keeping on. And so I encourage you to just show up and follow up, and it will serve you well.
So true. So true. Thank you. Norma?
Yeah, so I'll take this one from you, Natalie, because you said it on a podium once, but it's having the courage, right? And it's the courage to show up, the courage to follow up, the courage to be told no many times, and get used to being told no, and there will be yeses. And I had heard at a presentation that I was at once when I was with Abbott, and I can't remember who the author was, but they said, show up on time, and show up on time dressed to play. And if you do that, no matter where you go, whether it's to look for jobs or at an interview or at the job that you've taken or at a networking event, you show up on time, and you show up on time dressed to play.
Awesome. Barb?
Yeah, I'm thinking about what would be the final message. I mean, I think it is that stepping out of your comfort zone that we're all saying, and believing in yourself, and don't give up. And I think the biggest thing is knowing a mistake or a bad decision is a fast learning opportunity if you're willing to admit it. So don't just believe in yourself. It's the most important thing, because you're going to end up in situations where you're anxious, where you're uncomfortable, where you don't think you know what you're doing. I don't know if females are worse about this. Somebody mentioned it. We need 100% before you even apply for the job. Forget it. You'll figure it out. You can do it. Those are my last words. You can do it.
I love it. I don't know how all of you are feeling, but honestly, we're so lucky to have these perspectives shared with us today. And the thing that you know is it's coming right from that truth, which really at the end of the day is where we should all be working from. So I know I've enjoyed it. It's been wonderful being here. Julia, did you want to just finish off with anything?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's the first time I've been on a panel with nothing but women, and it's been a great experience. I'm sorry, David, you were on it too, but you were external.
Back to you, David. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks. I thank all the speakers. Thanks, Julia and Natalie, for doing a great job moderating, and thanks Renata and Catherine and Norma and Barb for your insights. And lastly, but not Kara and Amanda and Vivian for helping me to put this together for all these. This is our last one of the season. So thank you everyone for the great presentations. And as Catherine as posted in capital letters, you can do it in the chat box. So have a great weekend, and hope to see you all soon at drinks, hopefully back in the summer when we are finally allowed to do it again. So thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Such a privilege. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks.